So the other day I came across a video by this guy named Kross where he talks about his problems with the ending of Avatar The Last Airbender. Basically what he's saying is that the lion turtle and energy bending were bad additions to the story and lessened its climax. Unlike him, apparently I've seen this take several times before in forums and on YouTube and it always bothered me, so I figured this is as good an occasion as any to finally write something about it. Going forward, I will use Kross' video to make my points, simply because it's a great showcase for everything people don't like about the ending of ATLA. Now I'm very explicitly not here to bash this guy or his work, that's not my job. This is purely a discussion of Avatar The Last Airbender.
Because Avatar The Last Airbender's world is so developed, and the fact that we're talking about the finale of the show, the audience is going to have a very firm idea of what is likely to happen. Energy bending is a completely new technique that was never hinted at before the episode it appears in, and so there is quite literally no way that anyone could have seen it coming.
Of course no one could have seen it coming, but the introduction of it shouldn't blow you out of your shoes either. From the moment in the Moor Aang's problem with killing Ozai was brought up, the viewer expected that it would be resolved somehow. Maybe not through a giant lion turtle, but somehow. Energy bending is not an outlandish concept in the context of this universe. Early into Season 2, chi-blocking is introduced, so the idea of losing one's bending powers, even if only momentarily, exists within the show. The same goes for hybrid animals teaching bending to humans. Guru Patik was able to read the energy within living beings. Would being able to control it go too far?
It messes up the magic system. One of the aspects of Avatar which gets the most praise, and rightfully so, is its magic system. Bending is one of the most well thought out and executed magic systems I think I have ever seen, and this is because the world of Avatar has established rules and limitations on bending.
While it's true that the rules of bending are relatively clearly defined, anything vaguely related to spirits or mysticism is not. That's kind of the appeal of it. Ko has the ability to steal faces, Wan Chi-Tong can somehow sink his library into the ground, Hei-Bai has two forms he can change between. It's never explained how any of that works, and that's besides the point. The rules here are soft. Despite its name, energy bending is not really a bending style like fire or earth are. It's much more akin to a number of other supernatural powers that pop up over the course of the series without any notable prior setup. Remember the swamp episode? I haven't met anyone who said that this shit here
breaks the predefined rules of the show, which prompts all sorts of questions about what this new ability can do, what its limitations are, how it works, etc.
You could even argue energy bending got relatively much setup, comparatively speaking to other stuff in the series. ATLA is by and large an episodic show. Aside from a few overarching plot points, most things are brought up and resolved within one episode or multi-parter. Sozon's Comet has 4 parts. The lion turtle appears in the first and talks with Aang in the second. Energy bending is used in the 4th. Now, you could argue that's still not a lot considering this is the series finale. And just because the show's structure works like that still doesn't mean it's good, and the lion turtle could have appeared even further back, and I think that would be a fair point. Still, there is build-up. Saying it comes out of nowhere just isn't true. An often used counter-argument here is, but actually, lion turtles are foreshadowed in the episode The Library. And if your neckbeard is extra long, you also know that statues of lion turtles appear in Piandao's garden in the unused pilot episode. The problem with this is that 1. A casual viewer most likely won't remember the throwaway line from 1.5 seasons ago.
Hey, look at these weird lion turtle things.
Or notice some statues in some background. And 2. Those instances don't really tell us anything about lion turtles except that they exist and are huge. It's nowhere hinted at that they might have magic powers or any kind of special abilities really. Yes, technically they have been established, but this argument is still pretty weak.
Aang's character arc was gearing up to send a message about responsibility and how sometimes you have to put your personal values aside to do what's best for the big picture. A message that I value deeply and that I wish was taught to more kids.
Ah yes, here's the big one. This is arguably what people complain the most about. Aang should have killed Ozai, they say, or he should have taken responsibility instead of being a whiny pacifist. Or Aang had a character arc going on that went nowhere, energy bending was the easy way out. And I thought about this a lot. Here's my conclusion. Air nomads believe that all life is sacred. Those guys are vegetarians, their weapons of choice are specifically designed without any pointy ends, and their whole bending style revolves around evading conflict as much as possible. Over the course of the series, this philosophy is shown again and again to be central parts of Aang's identity. He doesn't like violence and he solves his problems through smart thinking rather than brute force. But this also ties into his greatest flaw as a person, because if need be he lacks the determination to face things head on. That's why the story begins with him running away, and why in the middle of season 2 he has a rocky start with earthbending, and why we're now in a situation where everyone tells him he has to kill Ozai or else the world will end. Introducing this dilemma is honestly the perfect way to end this arc in the show. Aang has to make a decision between letting down all of humanity, again, or giving up on the ideals that not only he, but his entire dead culture stand for. It reflects his roles as both the Avatar and the Last Airbender. So yeah, I guess it is pretty disappointing that the turtle shows up and Aang just
gets to skip the moral dilemma.
Is what I'd say if I hadn't actually watched the show. Excuse me, but what is this?
I guess I don't have a choice, Momo. I have to kill the Fire Lord.
Do people think he said that just for fun? That's nothing a pacifist would say on a whim. Aang spends 1.5 episodes searching for an answer to this problem. He discusses it with his friends, he meditates on it, he goes through a full Avatar cycle in the hope that someone might know a different solution, and everyone tells him there's only one way to go. And he comes to the conclusion that, quote, I guess I don't have a choice, I have to kill the Fire Lord. And people have the nerve to say he didn't do anything and just skipped the conflict? Are you serious? It is directly and only after this that he realizes that he's on a turtle and gets energy bending. That's not a coincidence. Aang gets a way out, yes, but first he had to make this decision. That's why I think that
Aang takes virtually no action of his own to acquire energy bending. It is instead gifted upon him by the lion turtle. Aang didn't do anything.
There's a wrong takeaway here. Yes, there's nothing he does directly in order to acquire energy bending, but if you look at it from a meta perspective, the lion turtle awards him for making his choice. Let's be real here. ATLA is a Nickelodeon show. We knew from the start that Aang wasn't going to kill Ozai. The writers took the dilemma as far as they could. Saying he was determined to take a life was the most they could make Aang do, which is enough to complete his arc. But I assume people thought this would go even further and that Aang would actively try to smash Ozai's skull with a rock or something, and then they were perplexed when he didn't. What did you expect?
The message being sent is not that even in the worst situations you can find a way to make everyone happy. It is that when you are in a lose-lose scenario, the best thing you can do is hope that someone else fixes the problem for you.
I disagree. The message is, desperate times call for desperate measures, but life will reward you if you go out of your way to harm others as little as possible. In any other show, the lesson would have simply been killing bad, and Aang would have punched Ozai in the face until he was KO. They went out of their way to have a moral dilemma here, and I cannot for the life of me imagine they just kinda forgot about it halfway through.
The actual fight between Aang and Ozai, while being visually spectacular, is one of the most boring fights in the entire show because it's just Aang getting the shit rocked out of him for the first half of the fight, then he goes into the Avatar state and rocks the shit out of Ozai for the second half. There is no sense of pushing and pulling in this fight, as if the characters are adapting to each other's style of combat, unlike virtually every other major fight scene in the entire show.
I haven't actually heard this take a lot of times before, but I definitely think calling the fight more quote-unquote boring due to its structure is valid criticism. However, I also believe there's some thematic justification for it. You see, this fight isn't about who's stronger, Aang or Ozai. It's about if Aang can beat the Fire Lord without killing him. At first, Aang fights by himself and is completely outmatched. Not necessarily because he lacks strength, but because he's holding back. In the Avatar state, Aang absolutely overpowers Ozai, but not a single one of the past Avatars knows of a way to stop him without killing him. As Ozai says, even with all the power in the world, he is still weak. That's why Aang doesn't carry out his final attack, but instead releases Ozai, and then, without going into the Avatar state again, defeats him with a new trick he learned. Does it excuse not having a more dynamic fight structure? I don't know, but I wanted to mention it. Okay, I guess that's all I have to say on this. As mentioned in the video, all of those complaints are very minor, and overall Avatar is extremely beloved. As a result, at least a lot of the discussions surrounding the show has indeed become very circle jerky over the years. Don't be afraid to say it, that's 100% the right word. If there's one thing I wholeheartedly agree with Kross, it's that there's merit in criticizing your favorite things and judging them by their own standards. Not despite, but because you love them. So that's what I did too. Why is defeating the Fire Lord without taking his life ever a problem? And how exactly does taking his bending away solve it? The answer should be simple. Knock him out, chain him down and throw him in prison. Unless it's somehow impossible if he's still able to bend, taking his powers alone will accomplish nothing. That's some bullshit video game logic, Ozai ain't no Sephiroth. Despite what this shorty wants you make believe, he's not a threat to the world because of his own firepower. He's dangerous because he's a king and has an army. Would his troops stop listening to him because he's a non-bender? Speaking of which, why does anyone listen to Zuko when he says he's the new Fire Lord? I assume the logic here is that he and Azula had an Agni Kai about it, but he lost. Was it lightning strike against Katara considered a foul and he won by default? Is that it? Did the Fire Sages decide that Azula has gone completely crazy and Zuko is worthy of the crown or something? Last time I checked, he was still the banished prince who lied about killing the Avatar so he could return home in glory, only to then full on betray his nation and join them rebels. Why does anyone accept him as their ruler? What are those guys cheering for? Okay, end card. 3 things. 1. If you haven't already, check out Kross' video. 2. I'm obviously no authority here, so if you think I'm wrong, please tell me why in the comments. 3. I have no experience making videos. I'm sure the overall production quality of this will be shit. Criticism would be very much appreciated. Bye.